It's time for the Rick Smith Show. Now, here is the voice of the working class, Rick Smith.
And welcome, brothers, sisters, working class heroes. This is the Rick Smith Show. Thanks so much for being here today on the big program. Lots to get to, lots to talk about. Axios had some interesting numbers. Because lately I've been hearing a lot of people going, I'd really like to, rebuild the roads and bridges, and I'd like to do all that investing in infrastructure and investing in reshoring manufacturing and, investing in things like healthcare and education. We'd love to do all that stuff. But Rick, we're broke. We don't have any money. Couldn't possibly do all those wonderful things that you talk about. And look, we've got some problems. $34 trillion in debt, which we've recently passed. Puts us somewhere in the debt to GDP ratio of about 123%. And I get people going, but that's, we're going to be Greece. If you remember, Greece was like 700 to 1 debt to GDP ratio. Definitely not Greece. And not even Japan, who has right now the highest debt to GDP ratio of the industrialized countries at 255%. China's nipping at our heels at 83%. So the world is in this debt-fueled bubble because of the pandemic. Had a little thing happen. Maybe you heard about it. And we spent a lot of money to make sure that we got through it. And it's interesting to hear people, say, well, it's all this inflation because Joe Biden spent all this money. And you go, no, most of the spending was done under Trump. I mean, a guy spent a quarter of that $34 trillion. I'm making it better than it actually is. And this is where, my mind goes to these weird places because, right now you've got all the bickering and all the nonsense going on in DC about, should we pay our bills? Shouldn't we? Should we, not do anything? Should we, try and save Social Security? Or should we just let it wither on the vine? Understand, by design. Our Republican friends, they want to destroy Medicare. They want to destroy Social Security. They want to destroy the social safety net. They want the good old days where if you're hungry enough and desperate enough to work for poverty wages, well, that, my friends, is your reality. And look, they're loosening child labor laws so they can get to that point to where you don't really have a choice. Got to send those kids into the workforce. Let them work for poverty wages just so you can keep a roof over their head and a meal on the table. But it got me into one of these discussions yesterday about debt and deficits. And it's amazing to me how many people don't look at themselves while they're advocating for certain programs. For instance, I talked to a guy who is literally 300 to 1 debt to GDP ratio at his own kitchen table because he's got a mortgage, he's got car payment, he's got some loans, he's credit cards, he's got all kinds of stuff, and didn't actually bother to do the math. And I said, I'll be honest with you, I would rather take the U.S.'s position with assets, the ability to raise taxes on rich people, and do some common sense stuff to solve our debt problems than yours in an industry that sadly is probably going to go away in your lifetime to automation, and you're still 300 to 1 debt to GDP ratio. And it was one of these kind of epiphany moments for this guy going, I never thought of it that way. And we don't think about things in that frame, that our own personal life, maybe we're worse off than our own. How's that possible? We're worse off than our own government. And again, I come back to, we can solve those problems of our government. We can. We've got the tools. We have the ability. We just have to get on the same page. So when I started talking about, what do you do when you can't pay the light bill? What do you do when you don't have money to put food on the table? What do you do? And his thing was, well, I usually work a little bit of overtime. We do a little bit of this, a little bit of that. We bring in extra money to be able to cover the cost. I go, but you don't cut things out. Like, there's a hole in the roof. You don't let the hole get bigger, right? And the answer is, of course not. So he basically answered all of the questions politically that he needed, but still wasn't willing to go, yeah, we should tax rich people, which is mind-blowing to me when you look at the fact that, the pandemic, especially. Now, we're going to blame a lot of this on the pandemic. A lot of our problems, it's easy to go, it's the pandemic's fault. No, it's structural. But, since the pandemic, the 5 wealthiest people on this planet got even richer. Their wealth grew by almost $900 billion. 5 people. While, what was it, 5 billion people? Their net worth went backwards. They lost money. And when you look at the fact that the 5 richest men saw their fortunes rise by 114% between March of 2020 and November of 2023, or as I like to put it, a cool $14 million an hour, 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, 52 weeks a year, 14 million. And look, if you can get a gig for 14 million bucks an hour, I say take it. But the reality is not all of us have that fortune of being one of those 5. And right here at home, our billionaires, they saw their wealth grow by a cool $1.6 trillion. They're $1.6 trillion richer than they were in 2020. An increase of 46%. Did you see your net worth go up by 46%? And our heavy 3, Musk, Bezos, and Ellison, they saw their wealth jump by 84%. These numbers from Oxfam, the report that came out of that little powwow in Switzerland last week. And this is where you go, we can do things policy-wise to turn the tables and to, pay our bills. And look, I'm fiscally conservative. I believe that you have to pay your bills. I believe that you have to raise money to pay those bills. I'm not someone who says we should slash and burn. Sorry, we're not going to let children starve. Sorry, we're not going to kick Granny to the curb because she ran out of money and we can't keep her in the nursing home. Sorry, we're not going to do a lot of the conservative pull yourself up by the bootstraps without boots kind of policy measures. We're going to do the right things. We're going to do the compassionate, the empathetic things. We're going to do what you would want people to do for you in your moment of need. But we're going to pay for it. And this is the key part here. We're going to pursue policies that are going to allow us. That's right. We're going to pursue policy, smart policy, sound investment that's going to help us build this. And the frustrating part for me is the echo chamber on the right. They want to blame everything on Joe Biden like this is some new construct. Understand, we've been heading down this path for a very long time. The wealth distribution in this country overwhelmingly has gone to our heavy 1%ers, has gone to the very top and away from you and me. And the sad reality is as our wages have stagnated and in a lot of cases declined, revenues going into our government have as well, which means we have less money for Social Security. We have less money to invest in education and healthcare and all of the things that everyone says they want and that we need. And the more I look at this, the angrier I get, because these were choices that were made. These were policy choices by elected officials, bought and paid for by campaign dollars. And I always said, look, the rich people have all the money, but we've outprocreated them. There are more of us. We can vote. We can throw the bums out. And you know what? We can fight for policies we want. But it's interesting to watch and listen to people who side with the billionaire message, because that's all we're getting from our corporate-controlled mainstream media. So for me, I say we start taxing these billionaires out of existence, invest in public education, invest in public health, and maybe we got a shot. And when we come back, Mary Cathryn Ricker is going to be here to share some thoughts. She's the executive director over at the Shanker Institute. How do we save public education? How do we make sure that every kid has a shot at, making a living? Right back. Stick around.
We are AFGE, the American Federation of Government Employees. We represent 700,000 federal and D.C. government workers who are the vital threads of the fabric of American life. We support our nation's military. We take care of our nation's veterans. We protect our nation's borders. We respond to our nation's crises and natural disasters. We provide services to our nation's seniors. The American Federation of Government Employees. We work for America.
We are AFGE, the American Federation of Government Employees. We represent 700,000 federal and D.C. government workers who are the vital threads of the fabric of American life. We support our nation's military. We take care of our nation's veterans. We protect our nation's borders. We respond to our nation's crises and natural disasters. We provide services to our nation's seniors. The American Federation of Government Employees. We work for America.
Welcome back to the Rick Smith Show. Now, here is Rick Smith.
So, as you may remember, after the holiday, we came back and I talked about my vacation. And I talked about Eddie, the guy in Costa Rica who gave us a wonderful tour of his little piece of his paradise. And again, the thing that stuck with me about the day we spent with Eddie was the fact that this is a guy in a developing country who his pride point was the fact that children in his country were going to get a free education as far as their talents could take them. And he hammered on that point numerous times. The fact that the future for the children of his country was going to be bright. And it wasn't going to benefit him personally. It was going to help the kids of his country. And I thought it was an interesting moment because I look here at home and there's a move here at home of people who want to destroy what universal education we have at this moment. And here to share some thoughts on, maybe how we stop it and why it's important that we push for more expansive education. I keep saying we need to make no more K through 12. We need to go K through 14. Kids walk out with an associate's degree or a vocational trade. But here to share some thoughts on where we need to go, I've asked Mary Cathryn Ricker to come talk with us. She's the executive director of the Albert Shanker Institute. You can check out their website, shankerinstitute.org. Mary Cathryn, thanks for taking time for us.
Hey, thanks for having me on, Rick. I appreciate it.
So, I was taken back by this guy who he was just beaming with pride over the fact that their country was investing in education and the kids were going to have these opportunities, and in a poor country. In fact, they were selling it to the Nicaraguans as, hey, come pick our bananas and your kids will get an education. It was one of those moments that just stopped me in my tracks.
I think two things. One, Eddie is in good company in that around the world, I am inspired and motivated by everyone who has a lot of pride in their public schools and who really believes in universal access to a public education. And at the same time, I know that that's not a given. We have to advocate and fight and make the case every day for why that universal access to free, high quality public schools is necessary for all of our young people, not just in the United States, but obviously around the world.
I used to believe that, education was a nonpartisan issue, that of course we want our children to get the best education. Right. Of course we want them to be able to go as far as their talents will take, not as deep as their pockets are. And yet increasingly I look around and that's not so. And I look at a state like Indiana where there's actually a piece of legislation right now attacking child labor laws where after 8th grade, you finish 8th grade, 14 years old, you can drop out of school and go work on an industrial farm. Who needs an education when you can get out into the farm?
It is very conserving. It's concerning, nerve-wracking to think about these bills coming up. I know we're early in this legislative session for 2024 for those states already in their legislative session. But I know last year in 2023, I think Economic Policy Institute said that there were 13 states that introduced bills to weaken child labor protections. And I think every time one of these happens, we have to ask why. What problem do you think you're solving? Who do you think you're solving that problem for? Because these are not student-centered, these are not child-centered laws that are being introduced, or bills that are being introduced, or laws that are being passed.
No, it's exploitative, and the point is we need cheap labor, and what better labor to get than kids who don't know their rights, don't know they have rights, and won't question anything. And then the problem becomes, 20, 30 years down the road when these kids don't have an education, they don't have opportunities, then what? I don't care. We got our cheap labor.
Well, and child labor protections were put in place for really good reasons at the beginning, right? We're actually, we haven't come full circle. We haven't finished creating all of the child labor protections we should actually have. And here we have states rolling some of them back. And we know that this is happening at the same time that that states are sort of rolling back access to anti-poverty programs, or they are rationing funding to their public schools. These things are happening in a coordinated effort. And at the end of the day, our young people are going to be the ones who pay the price.
It seems almost like a systematic, well thought out, well funded plan to destroy public education. I mean, look, we've got that theory about race that's critical that they hammer on: CRT, the DEI, now child labor, drag shows and litter boxes. Oh my! Any reason they can come up with to destroy your local, well, not your local school, because everyone loves their local public schools. It's those other ones. It's those ones that we're told are bad, we're told have litter boxes in the corner, but no one can ever seem to find.
It's, what is really frustrating about this when you are rolling back protections for students is you actually have other states that are looking actually to strengthen protections for our young people in a variety of ways, right? And so on the one hand, you have rolling back protections, making it more dangerous for students to work, ignoring the science that says, the evidence that says that when you are letting students work, during the school day, longer than 8 hours, more than 30 hours a week during the school year, that students end up, they end up sleep deprived, they end up, struggling with consistent attendance, all of the things that get in the way of actually being able to show up to school, be present, and put their efforts into the learning situation that we want to create for them. Like you said at the very beginning of this program, there is we actually don't have to travel overseas. It's a luxury when we can, but when we run into someone anywhere who has a pride in their public schools, we actually need to be tapping into that pride to really be, deepening it, investing in it. We cannot be ignoring the evidence that says that these child labor protections are good for kids and roll them back and put our students in a precarious position when what we really want them to do, I know what you and I really want them to do, and a whole host of people like Eddie, we want our students to succeed in their public schools.
Yeah, it just seems we're going backwards. And look, on a lot of these fronts, these attacks aren't going to affect people like me. They're not going to affect my kids. My kids don't have to work, 30, 40 hours a week to put food on the table. They're not going to come after our kids, for any of the, the enormous attacks that we've been seeing. It's the already desperate. It's the kids who are already struggling. It's the people who are living in poverty. It's the parents who are now going to have to compete against their children in the workplace. This is all well thought out, well planned, and it's diabolical and it's evil in my view. And
I do feel
it
though it will
us.
impact us. It will, we could say, we could look at it to say oh, this may not impact me because, my students are actually, or my children are now older and, they're, out of college or whatever. But we actually live in a world where we are incredibly interconnected, right? And the more we recognize that, and the more our legislators recognize that when you roll back child labor protections, you're actually destabilizing a whole host of young people in your community, which means that your community is in danger of a negative impact as well. So we are so interconnected. And I think we actually need to care about all the young people in our community, whether they are young people sort of in our own home or next door to us or not. Our young people are the future of our communities. They're the future of all of our progress. And we need to be paying attention and we need to be vigilant about some of these mixed messages we're getting, where we are making it we're creating more dangerous situations for our students to work, where we are not investing in our public schools the way we should be, or the way we are, rolling back the sort of social safety nets that families need in our communities. We have to be paying attention to all of these things because we truly are interconnected and we need each other.
Yeah, I mean, there's a moment, and I said this several months back, that I think maybe we need to put education under the Department of Defense, because it seems like the only time we get the resources we need for something is when you couch it in terms of national security or defense. We got the milk program in schools back 100 years ago because kids World War I weren't strong enough to carry weapons, so we got to get some milk in there. We got school lunch programs for a lot of the same reasons. Maybe we need to start thinking about this as a national security issue, because if we're breaking up public education and it's only people who have means who can send their kids to school, what's that going to mean for the vast majority of families who don't have the resources?
I appreciate you bringing up the school lunch program, because I think it is a great example of a direction some states are going. Rather than rolling back child labor protections, my home state of Minnesota, last legislative session just introduced a universal school meals program for all students in our public schools. And there's evidence now that all students are taking advantage of that hunger does not have to be a barrier to learning like it was for some of our students on any given day. Yeah. And there's a great example of the sort of contrast that you can have when you have a state legislature that truly has a vision of strengthening the community for our young people.
Yeah, but the sad thing is we've known this for decades. I mean, when I was a kid growing up in the projects on the west side of Cleveland, when in the summertime, we used to go to the local public school, Purtis Elementary School, long gone. But in the summertime, they would have a hot lunch program. And for a lot of kids in that line, it was the only hot meal they got that day. And it was beneficial for the community. And, well, one of the first things Ronald Reagan did when he became president is wipe all that stuff out. Mr. Ketchup is a vegetable. One of those things that one of my first early, understanding of what politics means, it means, well, if you vote for this guy, he's going to destroy the school lunch program that helps so many people in your community.
I think, again, I think it's a great example to really contrast where we are making decisions that say we all do better when we all do better, and where we are making decisions that say like every person's on their own. Yeah. And like when we treat people like they are on their own and that there is no support system for them and they have to pull themselves up by their bootstraps and, sort of all the old adages, what we're really saying is that, is that I shouldn't care about my community. And I truly believe that the more we think about the question of what will make my community stronger, the more we are going to reject things like rolling back child labor protections.
Oh, it's crazy. And, yesterday on the program, we talked about invisible capital, the idea that some people take for granted things that they, I got an education, my parents bought me a car, I learned a work ethic from my parents who, I had a mother and father and all that. A lot of people don't have those opportunities and a strong, well-funded, well-rounded public education. Not everyone's getting in this country, and that should be something that we should be striving for. Like Eddie saying, look, this is our future. Our future is bright because we're moving in this direction instead of where we're going. And I fear where we're heading, where we're tearing down things that would make us better.
I think it is like the right question to be asking is, how do we remove every barrier that is in the way of our students receiving that high quality education, getting to school? And the wrong question is, how do we remove barriers for employers to ask our students to put in more time during the day, time during school, more time during the week, distractions from what their number one priority should be as a young person, that is pursuing their education, and and creating an opportunity for themselves as, as they build out their future.
You put that so nicely. I mean, I would have framed it a lot differently. I would have said, how do we not let employers exploit our children? But you much more eloquent, and that's why you're the teacher, and I'm barely been out of high school. But no, here's where I want to wrap this up, because I think when you talk to the average citizen, they want to have the best schools. They want their neighborhood school to be strong.
Absolutely.
They like their teacher, but there's so much money, there's so much organizing into destroying the big picture stuff. Yeah, your school's great, your teacher's wonderful. It's all the other ones that have to go. But in doing that, eventually, don't you lose yours too?
That's right. The suspicion of the other, however it sort of manifests itself. Like, I think my schools are great, but somewhere out there must be schools that people don't think are great, that somehow people are still sending their children to, but they don't feel are great. And then somehow, like, obviously there are some elected officials who believe, and so therefore let's expand working opportunities for our students, and not in the really productive ways we are seeing some communities and schools come together to create, like, registered apprenticeship programs, strong career and technical education programs, partnerships with apprenticeships, and, stackable credentials for students. There are some really exciting and innovative programs being put together when schools collaborate with their community to better meet the needs of our students. These are student-centered decisions that allow the expansion of experiential learning and other hands-on learning programs that come out of career and technical education and out of other partnerships. The P-Tech schools are a great example of that. If you are interested in truly providing on-the-job training, go the direction of some of these robust, innovative career and technical education programs and experiential learning programs. Do not go the direction of rolling back child labor protections.
So there's no apprenticeship for cleaning up the kill floor at the slaughterhouse, cleaning the machines, because little hands, little areas, cheap labor. It's good for the...
Right?
As I've said, I don't think the meatpacking industry could survive without the child labor abuses and the immigrant labor abuses that we currently see. And I haven't had anyone push back yet.
I just want to say to that point, truly, if we are seeing child labor violations on the rise, and we are, the instinct should be to protect our young people, not relax child labor laws, period.
There you go. And that's where we're going to leave it. But Mary Cathryn, I appreciate you taking some time. Keep up the great work there at the Albert Shanker Institute. I'd love to have you back again real soon.
Sounds good. Thanks, Rick.
Our good friend Mary Cathryn Ricker. Want to hear your thoughts? Email me, rick@thericksmithshow.com. I'm going to take a quick break. For our audience on Free Speech TV, thanks so much for tuning in. We will see you back here next time. For our radio audience, right back after this. Stick around.
Welcome back to The Rick Smith Show. Now, here is Rick Smith.
So you look at the fact that, as a whole, inequality in this country is at the worst level that it's been since before the Great Depression. You go back to the Gilded Age, and well, they got nothing on us. And this is where you start looking at the anger that people seem to have. I mean, the reason that we're constantly on edge, the reason that people are struggling, and this is one of these moments where the right takes advantage of this. There's a lot of messaging around, the country's broke and you're going to pay for it. Every person's, a gazillion dollars in debt to the government and they're going to come and get it today. And you go, no, that's not how that works. Do we have something of a problem? Yeah, we do. We can solve it with sane, rational, thoughtful policy. We as a country could come together and figure this out. As I said at the beginning, our debt to GDP ratio is 123% is what the number that Axios said. Again, we're not Japan at 255% debt to GDP ratio. But when you stop and think about it, and Many households in this country would love to be 123% debt to GDP ratio. And what that means is your yearly income, multiply that by the amount that you're in debt. If you make 50 grand a year and you have a $200,000 mortgage on your home, you have a 400% debt to GDP ratio. You're broke. Now you've got this asset. Maybe you get to keep it. And this is what they use on us, because $34 trillion is a lot of money. It is a lot of money. But we've allowed in this country the creation of a billionaire class. My grandparents' generation didn't have that. They had a tax code that said, no, we want that spread a little more equally. In fact, 1953 top marginal tax rate, 92%. So our very wealthy at the time, and we had wealthy people back then, we didn't have gazillionaires. We didn't have the Bezoses and the Musks who are in the $100 and some billion, $200 billion. We weren't flirting with, in the next couple of years, the first trillionaire. Stop and think about that. We're talking about in the next 10 years, there being a trillionaire and not taxing them out of existence. Now, I find it interesting. The news story over at the Business Insider. The story says that there's a right-wing think tank out there, a right-wing corporate think tank. And according to their spokesperson, the guy that they quoted, they believe that billionaires are actually great for the economy. Not just good, but great for the economy. And we as a country should be thrilled that, Bezos and Buffett and Musk and all of them, we should be thrilled that they exist. And you go, no, I'm not. I'm not thrilled with the idea that we have created this enormous wealth class through lower wages, less health care, less retirement security, less investment in our country, less investment in the future. We have, through our tax code, said, no, we want more rich people. Understand, we have more billionaires in the U.S. than any country in the world. But Rick, that's a sign of our prosperity. No, it's a sign of our stupidity. It's a sign that working people have gone, no, I'm going to be a billionaire someday. Chances are, no, you're not going to make $14 million an hour. That ain't going to happen. And I know my mother's rolling over going, ain't a word. But here's the thing. Here's their argument. Their argument is that billionaires are great for the country because they're innovators and they produce trillions of dollars of value for people here in the country. And it's why we have nice things. That's the argument. Without them, we'd all be standing around looking at each other. We'd all be walking around aimlessly in the cold without shoes or pants. We would go hungry without them. Then nothing would get done. It would be a barren wasteland, a dumpster fire. This would be a horrible country without our billionaires. What would we do? And the reality is instead of having one dictator, you would socialize this. He said the S word. Yeah, that's what Wall Street was supposed to be. When these big companies, sprung up, you broke them up. You taxed the people who started them at a rate where they socialized them. A lot of shareholders. Now, oddly enough, it's a lot of rich people. But that's how our system was set up. And we taxed those rich people. And what those rich people decided is instead of paying taxes, we'll pay higher wages. We'll invest in stuff to slap our name on. We'll do all of the things that the Carnegies and the Mellons and the people of that era did, which benefited society as a whole. When everyone was going to the local public school, the rich people and the poor people, the public school did better. Because the rich guy wasn't going to go, well, there's a poor kid in the school. We're not going to fund sports programs. No, they want the best for their kids, and everybody benefited from it, and that's a good thing. But what's happened is, you look at the reality. What's happened is we've grown way apart. We have a billionaire class now that, last numbers I saw, as of 2021, the top 1% accounted for 14.6% of all wages. That is double the share that it was 45 years ago. Double. Working people at the bottom 90%, took home 59% of all wages. The lowest level ever recorded. Let that sink in for a second. 90% of us got the lowest share of wages and income out of the economy than ever. Our top 1%, they have double what they got 45 years ago. This is what's known, my friends, as massive redistribution of wealth. But if you go back to the Tea Party people, they were losing their minds over taxes because they thought tax breaks and tax cuts were going to go to them. And I look at the tax cuts that Trump doled out, and right there, right in black and white, the perfect messaging vehicle for Democrats, and you never hear them talk about it. Trump and the Republicans gave the rich people permanent tax cuts, permanent corporate tax cuts, permanent high tax rates tax cuts. But you little folks, me, you, the people who go to work, punch a clock every week, who work for wages, not so much. Those sunset. They go away. And the reality is, if we had a better distribution of wealth, meaning higher wages for workers, what that would mean is that would be more revenue going into our government coffers. And the number that they keep throwing around is about $300 billion a year if we raise taxes on the just 2% on the 1%. You're talking about $300 billion a year. That could make a dent in the $34 trillion debt. I say you go back and you raise it a little bit higher. Maybe you get there faster. But what we've got is we've got a billionaire class that just keeps getting bigger and bigger, and their insatiable appetite for more, well, never done, never fed, never wanting more. And don't take my word for it. The wealth class of this country from the pandemic forward, they got wealthier during the pandemic and until now, simply, well, Molly Kinder, she's over at the Brookings Institute. She was quoted in a news article basically saying that, the wealthy got wealthier because the stock market boomed. Companies did really, really well. They benefited from, the Federal Reserve policies, the low interest rates, from big government spending. They benefited wildly. And what did they do with that money? What did they do with the money there? They doled it out to the people who own the stock. And who owns the stock? Well, Molly Kinder says the bulk of stock in this country, of shares of stock, are owned by the wealthiest households. Upwards of 70% of all stock are owned by just 5% of the richest household. So you've got 70% of the country's assets, really, being held by 5%. And they said, look, these companies spent 5 times more rewarding their shareholders through dividends and stock buybacks than they did raising pay for all of their workers. Now, we know this because we're living it, but we don't hear it. The fact that it's all about the shareholders. It's all about enriching the already enriched. And you go, well, how did they line their pockets? How did they get, $4.6 trillion in net wealth from the pandemic? Some obscene, outrageous number. Here it is. Corporations gouging consumers, you, me, people who spend almost every dime we earn just to make a living, just to put food on the table, a roof over the head, clothes on our kids' backs, sugar and shoes, man. Corporate America knows. They raise the prices, they raise their profits. Those profits go right from your pocket to our already wildly wealthy. Why? Because they can. And you go, well, inflation's Joe Biden's fault. No, this has been going on for a very long time. This is we've just noticed it moment. And you look at the fact that between 1978 and 2020, or 2022, CEO pay in this country rose by more than 1,200%. The average working stiff, that means you and me, our compensation from 1978 to 2022, 15.3% increase. I'm sorry, but that's not great. That's actually pretty bad. So investing in things that we need, like roads and bridges and healthcare and education and all of that stuff, well, our billionaires aren't interested in that unless there's a profit to be made off of it, which is why you're seeing this push to destroy public education and privatize and profitize. So we don't pay attention to the fact that we're paying more for healthcare, getting less, having less life expectancy, that the food we eat is controlled by a handful of corporations who are basically poisoning us because, hey, there are shortcuts to be had. And we're doing nothing politically to hold these corporations. Because remember, they used to be chartered. They used to have to do something for the common good, for the public good. It wasn't all about enriching the shareholders. It was about, what are you going to do to benefit society? I mean, that's out the window. It's been long gone. But so, we're used to that being down the road. But now it's just all about, hey, how can we line our pockets? I mean, go back to the 20s and 30s. There were bank robbers. Bonnie and Clyde, Pretty Boy Floyd. All of those characters of that would rob from the poor and rob from the banks and give to the poor. They would go in and trash bank records so banks couldn't repossess people's homes. They're enriching themselves too. Don't get me wrong. Today's bank robbers, they're no more Bonnies and Clydes. Today's bank robbers are CEOs and hedge fund managers, and they don't care about the poor. In fact, what they want to do, they want to exploit the poor. Good, cheap labor. We can make more money off their backs. We can give them high interest loans. Why? So we can line our pockets. And this is the thing that just, I got to tell you, just angers me to no end. Because we're not getting it. We're not getting the reality that we have a tax code that encourages wealth over work. We have a tax code that has been rigged against average everyday working people. And look, this thing that I used to believe in, that you work hard, play by the rules, that you're going to get ahead. It's not surprising to me that I see videos of young people on social media going, why do I want to go to a job and give hours of my life for not even enough money to survive? Why do I want to go and work for somebody and dedicate my time, my energy, my loyalty to someone who doesn't reciprocate, who doesn't care? Now understand, these are people who grew up watching their parents just abused by Wall Street, by big banks, by big corporations, by the moneyed interests. And this generation's not going to do it. And I don't blame them, because what's the reward? Look, I talked about this, not too long ago. I started in the industry that I was in, and it was a terrible beginning. I mean, you were laid off every winter. You were on call most of the time. Your life was never really your own, but you were making really good money. For a working class job, you were making good money. You had really good benefits. You had a really good retirement. Things were good. It had lots of, go back to the 80s and 90s, had tons of disposable income. And because of the fact that you Reagan forward, we were breaking up unions and crushing union density. And all of the stuff that happened through deregulation and Carter signing, trucking deregulation, this pressure, this downward pressure on wages, sapped all that away. And now I've got a reasonable paying job. It's not bad. Still have good benefits, still have a good pension, and that's what keeps me doing it. But it's not what it was. And this is where, as a country, we've got to start talking about, where do we want to be? What is what future do we want? And this is why I'm supportive of Joe Biden, because it looks like he is turning the corner. It looks like we're pushing back against neoliberalism and some of the Reaganomic philosophies that got us into the mess that we're in. The fact that we've got an industrial policy that says, hey, we're gonna create jobs here. In fact, we're gonna create union jobs here. The fact that we're investing in our infrastructure and in our country, that's a good thing. That we're looking at breaking up, big corporations and going after trade violations. Good stuff we should be celebrating, things that working people should be going, about damn time. This is what we should have been doing years ago. But instead, we're still concerned about who's going to what bathroom. Pronouns. I don't even know what a pronoun is, but I'm not using them. I got to tell you, this isn't that tough. It's the economy. It's always the economy. And the sooner we all wake up to that reality and we start pushing back and start pushing in a direction that's gonna enrich not just our lives, but the working class as a whole, so that we all do better. And in turn, we all pay a little bit more in taxes because we're making a lot more money. And maybe we start paying that debt so the next generation doesn't get completely screwed over. Maybe we talk about that. Maybe we talk about saving the little social safety net that we have, like Social Security and Medicare, instead of letting it wither like Republicans. That's the game plan. That's what they want to do. We're just gonna let it starve itself. We've locked it in the box. We're not going to allow anything to go in. But hey, it's just dying on its own, kind of a natural death, while they've got their hand over its mouth. But I want to hear your thoughts. Email me, rick@thericksmithshow.com. It's painfully apparent to me that we better get on the same page and quickly. Take off the red hats and the blue hats and get that hard hat on if we're going to rebuild this country. If we're going to reunite, we need to reunionize. Back after this. I'm Rick Smith, and this is Labor History in 2. On this day in labor history, the year was 1936. That was the day when 20 laborers who were part of the Civilian Conservation Corps got involved in a type of labor they probably never expected. The Civilian Conservation Corps was a program established by President Franklin Delano Roosevelt to get young men back to work during the Great Depression. The program employed men ages 18 to 26 to complete public works projects across the nation. CCC crews planted nearly 3 billion trees, constructed 470 fire towers, built 97,000 miles of fire roads, and constructed facilities at 800 parks across the nation. But snowy weather had ground work to a halt in Allegheny County, Maryland. The men of Company 324 were at the 15-Mile Creek camp waiting for the weather to clear. That's when they received a distress call. A woman was trapped due to the snow. She was in labor, but the 3-mile-long access road where she lived was impassable. Even worse, the state's snowplows were busy digging out other roads. The men of the CCC answered the call. 20 volunteers shoveled the snow by hand, working well into the night so the trapped woman could make it to the hospital to deliver her baby. In total, 30,000 young men working in 200-man crews participated in the CCC in Maryland from 1933 to 1942. Due to its proximity to Washington, D.C., the state was designated the first Corps area. The CCC men helped to build campgrounds, pavilions, and hiking and skiing trails that greatly enhanced the recreation landscape of that state. But for one woman, they were remembered for helping her when she needed it most, during the birth of her child on a snowy day in January. Like what you hear? Check out more at laborhistoryin2.com. Welcome back to the Rick Smith Show. Check out our website, ricksmithshow.com. Questions, comments, something on your mind, email me, rick@thericksmithshow.com. So Kevin McCarthy, I haven't heard the last of Kevin. No, he has come out. He was doing an interview on the Fox Business with Maria Bartiromo, and she asked him, said, hey, why are Republicans, kicking the can down the road, and why are they averting a government shutdown? What's going on? And he said, well, you should really be asking the Freedom Caucus. They are the ones who have stopped the Republicans from being able to govern. And that's a pretty important line, because it's Kevin McCarthy saying that, former speaker, ousted, a little bitter, I'm sure, but I've said that for years now. That is not new. It may be news to McCarthy, or maybe it's something that he has decided that he can say out loud now that it doesn't matter, that he's moving along. Wish he'd have done that, I don't know, while he had the power when it mattered. This is what drives me crazy about people. When you have the power to make change, when you have the power to actually do something, you choose not to, but then afterwards, then you come forward. That's the part that just drives me nuts. And yeah, of course, the Kook Caucus, or as they call themselves, the Freedom Caucus, they've opposed virtually everything that you could possibly imagine that would well, not just make people's lives better, but that would make the government functional. Because remember, these are the people who don't believe in government. These are the people who tell you government's broken, and then they prove it. These are the people who, if they don't get their way, they take their ball and they go home. These are not the kind of people that you have in government, because government is about compromise. It's about negotiation. It's about getting stuff done. It's about more than just your ego and, well, your social media platforms. And as I look at this, what's frustrating and angering is this is exactly what our wealth class wants. They want a kind of divided government of people who are hardliners. We're not going to move for any reason, because the status quo benefits whom? Did I hear you say the billionaires? Yeah, the status quo definitely benefits the very wealthy at the expense of working people. Because look, with all the union organizing and all the militancy going on, all of the New York, there's nothing unless there's government policy to help push that along. Yeah, we've had a lot of activity, and that's great. Building worker power is extremely important. But having that legal backing, that's what built the most prosperous working class in history. This idea that it was just magic. It was the invisible hand being magic is kind of ludicrous. Finally, I want to get to a quick email that I got. I haven't talked about this, but Ann from Oklahoma sent me this email. Said, Rick, you were the first person I heard talk about Mary Lou Retton's health condition and lack of health insurance, but I have not heard you follow up after she made the television appearance talking about her condition. I thought for sure you would have followed up. What are your thoughts? My thoughts are it's a sad situation. Here is a national treasure, a national icon, someone who the country looked up to. She's done some things I'm not overly thrilled with, around the Gymnastics Association, but that's an argument for another day. But here's the thing. This is someone who the country looks to. This is a hero. And look how far she's fallen. Now, again, some of it's bad finances, some of it's bad planning, some of it's divorce. She blames not having health insurance on the fact that she had 30 orthopedic surgeries. And according to her, these are pre-existing conditions. Nothing I can do about that. And you go, no, pre-existing conditions were basically outlawed under the Affordable Care Act. Obamacare. This should be a learning moment. This should have been a moment where you go, no, Mary Lou, this. And she could have been a spokesperson and go, hey, look at me. I was America's sweetheart. I was on the Wheaties box, and now I'm begging people online for pennies. And look, I don't want to beat her up. I don't want anything negative said about her other than the fact that she chose not to get health insurance. And things have consequences. Now, the reality is a bunch of dumb people reached into their pockets and gave someone who has millions of dollars their hard-earned money because they chose not to buy health insurance. Because what we know, and we know this, what was it, 4 out of 5 people, according to the guy who's the head of Health and Human Services, 4 out of 5 people can find a plan for less than $10 a month. And if you are in the higher income, premium costs are capped at 8.5% of household income. So even if, let's say a 60-year-old with $100,000 a year in income would get a $300 a month subsidy, they'd have to pay about $700 a month towards their premiums. Which I got to tell you, if you're getting up in age, I don't know, maybe it's something you think about. So instead of doing this interview and oh pitiful me, and saying, oh, we're going to give all this money without any details to charity and all that stuff, how about saying maybe don't not have coverage? Maybe be a spokesperson for the good of the ACA, a little education. But no, I'm not going to beat her up. I wish her well, and I hope all of us get a learning experience out of this. But thanks so much for tuning in. We will see you back here next time. Thanks for being here.
You've been listening to The Rick Smith Show. Email Rick at rick@thericksmithshow.com. Until next time, this has been The Rick Smith Show, where working people come to talk.